Hi, hola. Welcome back to Witches of the Moon. I am the humble apprentice, your Friday host. This is season 12, week 7, and the topic for this week is servitors. I will be going over how I work with it and finally how to release the servitor once they have completed their goals and you no longer need them. The first thing that I do is I light some incense, I light a candle, and I meditate on what I need the servitor to do. And then I break down the task into different levels of work. What's the easiest and fastest way for the servitor to reach its goal? What does the servitor have to do, and what do I need to do? It is a collaboration between the servitor and myself. The goal is achieved the fastest if we work together. For this example, I will go through the process of creating a servitor to create a beautiful garden. So I'm using some cleansing and protective incense that I made from plants and herbs and trees and bark from around my house. I put grass, I put a little bit of dirt. I also added sage and cinnamon and benzoin resin and frankincense. So it's cleansing and protective and will help me clear my mind and focus my intention on what the purpose of the servitor is and bring clarity. So the first thing we did was have a clear intent and a goal for the servitor. The second thing I'm going to do is create a sigil or a logo to draw on the house where the servitor is going to live. The next step is to figure out what the servitor is going to look like. What form best suits the servitor for the task. A servitor can have any form that you think helps with your goal. It can be a robot, it can be a sphere, an energy sphere. It could be in the shape of a balloon. It could be in the shape of a phoenix, a rabbit, whatever suits your goal and whatever is going to help the servitor achieve your goal the fastest and be most effective. It can look like Yoda or Dobby or any form that calls to you, that draws you, that's going to make it easy for you to work with. Okay, next is you're going to figure out what the servitor wants to consume, whether it be in ethereal form, energy form, or physical form. What is going to recharge the servitor? How are you going to feed it? What is it going to eat? You're going to breathe life into this thought form, this helper. It's going to work on the physical from the fifth dimension or from the ethereal, from the astral plane. But it will affect change in your life on the physical plane. Next, you're going to figure out, where is the servitor going to live? Where is it going to reside? Where is it going to rest and recuperate, or just hang out when you don't need its help, its assistance? It could live in a crystal. If you're going to use a crystal, try to use something that's going to have strength and is not going to break or crack if you drop it or if it falls. You can put it in a bottle. It could live in a rock, a stone. It could also, which is very helpful, live in a form that represents the astral image or the image of the servitor that it's going to have. So let's say you want to have a servitor that looks like an elephant, that has a ethereal form of an elephant. It's easy to use something that represents the form that you give it in the astral, because it reminds you of it, and this can be its home. And that's where you would draw or paint or carve the sigil that you will create that represents the servitor. So let's say you're creating a servitor that in the astral plane has the shape of a robot. You can make this a little toy be the home of the servitor, because it reminds you and it gives you the feeling of a robot. And since it would be really difficult for me to paint or carve the sigil that I create onto the little robot, I can draw it on a piece of paper. And some people burn the sigils to activate them. I actually like to activate it and then put the little doll or robot right on top of the sigil. So it sits right on top of the sigil in a little piece of vellum or parchment. And let's say you wanted to create a sphere of energy, because you want to learn a new language and you want the energy sphere to go to that country and absorb the language from the people as they speak it, and bring it back and to help you learn. So you can have the home of the sphere be, a crystal sphere, a crystal ball. It reminds you of the shape of the sphere, and that every time you hold the sphere, you absorb whatever the servitor, whatever information the servitor gathered for you. Within the topic of the goals, you can set a timeline for the servitor. It is helpful if you decide on what date it's going to be born or created, and figure out what is going on with the planets astrologically, where the moon is going to be located. All of these elements help with the creation of your servitor and imbue it with energy. So you will decide when you're going to activate the servitor, how long you need the servitor to work with you. You can say, as long as my garden needs tending, you will be working with me every spring, summer, and fall. You can rest during the winter to recharge. And in 5 years, 10 years, 2 years, whatever length of time you want to give the servitor, and then you can tell it, since this is going to be for my garden, that it can recharge itself with the light of the moon and the stars And in the daytime, it can absorb the sunlight and the rain to recharge itself, and then it will be completely refueled to continue working. That's one way of feeding. You can also feed your servitor with different types of energy, or let's say you have, because I'm going to use this quartz crystal, which has something that looks like moss embedded in it. So it reminds me of outdoors and green and lush, and it's strong, it's sturdy, it has a little facet here where I can draw my sigil. So I'm going to place this in the center of my garden so that it can live there and it can recharge in the moonlight and in the sunlight and with the rain. And it could work. You can use these servitors for work and your job or your business to bring health and prosperity, remove obstacles, help you learn something. Anyway, so this is a crystal that will be the home for the servitor. You next have to decide on a name. What will be its name, and what will be a command, a keyword that you can associate with the servitor that will let it know that it's time to get busy, that it's time to work. And then the last thing is you can create at the end of the timeline a phrase with one keyword that will be different from the activation keyword, that will be a release keyword. So when you no longer need to work with that servitor, you can let it know that it's time to dissipate, and it can dissolve and be released. I like to use the word dissolved and be released to be free, because I don't want any entity to be subject to any physical form or energetic form when it's no longer needed. I don't want it to work on its own for any other purpose or be waiting for me for another command. I want it to dissolve and go back to just being energy with potential. We will work on creating a sigil and a logo for the servitor. Creating a sigil, it can be as simple or as complicated as you need it to be, or as involved or as creative as you want to work with. For the purpose of this video, I am going to use the tried and true form of sigil making. So the purpose of the servitor will be to create a beautiful garden. The first time I just go through and take out any letters that repeat. So we go from create a beautiful garden to CREATBUIFLGDN. And then I remove all the vowels, and we just are left with the consonants. So CRTBFLGDN. Next, what you need to do to create a sigil is make a logo. Make an image that brings to mind all this energy and all this feeling. And while you're creating the artistic form of these letters on this to create a logo, I like circles because I like them round and I like them moving, and it's like a constant movement in a sunwise or clockwise. That is to bring things in. Okay, so the next thing, you're going to take all these letters and you're going to draw them in here in a way that feels good to you. I will start with the letter T. I like to use graph paper because it helps me with my straight lines. And it helps divide the paper into grids, and it just makes it easier for me. So now I have 3 sections, and you don't have to, but I find that it helps me. So I've already done this one. The letter C it just feels important because of the strong sound. So I'm going to make this kind of big here. I would take a lot longer and move things around normally, but for the purpose of this video, we're just going to go through it. And we're going to add the letters here. And now B seems to be balanced with the R over here. And the F, I kind of want to do something. You can add curlicues and flourishes and now the G, so we're going to get rid of the B. Now we're going to make curly. So that's the G. Maybe the C can be over here. Now we need the L and the N. So there. Well, I like that, but I want to just really want to make it balanced. So there. And you can make, I am creating my sigil, my logo, and I'm going to create it with my intention and the feelings that I get. So this was just a way of balancing, and especially in a garden, they can be, there can be movement, but there has to be some elements, in my opinion, that create balance and in the physical form. So that is a sigil, and that is what we will draw here. I'm going to pause the video. Some people, like I said, burn the sigil to activate it, which I might do anyway, but I want to have, I want to stamp this crystal with the focus. I want the sigil to be the focus and to be on the crystal. Okay, I don't know if I focused on the sigil. Anyway, so that's the way I made the sigil. Now I drew with a Sharpie the sigil right on the face of the crystal. It's gonna be really difficult for you to see it, but it's right there. It's just a very light blue color, but I know it's there, and it is there, and it's actually in the astral. I carved it, so it is a permanent residence for the servitor. I don't reuse the same home for a different servitor. It is the home, its residence, its place where it will recharge and come and rest and exist. Well, it's not working. Well, it's not working with you. The next thing I'm going to do is figure out a name. Now, for me, creating a name or choosing a name is important. But the way I see it, I don't want to associate the name with a person. I will use a name that I make up, like green mist or elements from a garden that make me feel abundant and that it's beautiful and mystical. I will create a name and I will give it its name, but I am not actually going to create the servitor today. So I'm not going to name the servitor, and I'm not going to activate the servitor either. Because for that, I want to choose a specific date, and I want to charge myself and the crystal with energy prior to activating the servitor. The more energy and universal life force you pour into the servitor, the faster and stronger results you get from it, the better relationship you have with it, the stronger the communication and the bond you will create with your servitor. Another thing that we will consider is what form the servitor is going to have in the astral plane. What is the servitor actually going to look like? What image are you going to bring up when you think of your servitor? I was thinking of making like a robot, something that just works outside, without fear of rust or getting tired. But then I remembered, well, magic doesn't really need a physical exertion. You don't have to get tired. Magic is magic because it creates. You're pouring in energy. But I remembered who I thought was super awesome, who I thought was really powerful while creating a change in their environment without a lot of their personal energy invested in it. And since I don't want to associate the servitor to any specific person, but I still want it to have the attributes of a human being, like the physical form, appear similar to a human being, I thought of Snow White. I mean, she was a white witch. If you think about her abilities, she spoke to animals. She got animals to do all of the work. I mean, she's extremely magical. So I need my servitor to be able to work with the animals in the environment to create a physical change in the three-dimensional world. So that is the image that I'm going to envision and visualize my servitor to have. And for this purpose, for this example, I'm going to put a lifespan of 4 years. So I'm going to say that for the next 4 years, this servitor will have goals to achieve of creating a beautiful garden. The sub-goals, or the paths to achieving the beautiful garden, will be to reduce the growth of invasive plants and shrubs. Number 2, to energize the trees and healing herbs, because I don't want a beauty to be the only purpose of the garden. And then the third goal breakdown will be to drive away harmful insects. And so the next thing I'm going to work with the servitor and let the servitor know is that there's going to be a lot of tools available for the servitor to create the job, to work on the job. First and foremost, I am going to work as well on the garden and do some of the physical work that's going to be needed. But also, the servitor is going to have any tool that it needs to, let's say, remove shrubs and transplant trees and work the ground. So since I don't want there to be clutter in the astral or in the physical, the tools that I'm going to give the servitor will be an astral tool replicator that creates and recycles any tool that the servitor needs, and they will have complete control over the replicator. Second, a garden house in the astral. So a little bit larger than a shed, right? Where it can plan and design the garden, take breaks, and store the tools while they are in use, while they still need them. And the third will be the ability to work and lead the animals and insects to achieve its goals. So it will have a ton of help with clearing out aphids, having the ladybugs eat the aphids, having the grasshoppers eat grasses and weeds that we don't need. The rabbits can eat the roots of the plants that are invasive and we don't need here. Have the birds and other feathered creatures spread seeds and fertilize. Having a detailed idea of what you want the servitor to do will help guide the work and help the servitor achieve its goals as fast as possible for you. Another thing, when you activate your servitor, make sure that the key word or key phrase that you use, that when you give it life, when you breathe it into existence, that you let it know that that key phrase will only work for you, only with your voice or thought, and you are the only one that can work with the servitor. That it can come back to its home when it's not helping you, when it's not doing any of the work for you, that it will rest and recharge there until you call it again. That the servitor will not work with anyone besides you. Also, make sure that when you give the release phrase, that you let it know that when you are ready to release it and you no longer need to work with it, that when it's ready to let go, not at that time, that particular moment, not the time that you're letting it know what its release word is, but in the future, once it has achieved all its goals and it's time for it to retire, rest, recuperate, and be free and dissipate and disappear and be released, that is when that keyword will let the servitor disintegrate and go back to being energy. You can also stipulate that distance, or whether it gets lost or stolen or taken, will not break your bond, and that you don't have to be physically in the presence of the crystal to call upon its help or to get it to work with you, or to be released. So be as clear as possible. Write down everything you want to do with the servitor, everything you want the servitor to do for you, and think about what you would like for yourself. You are creating an entity. You're breathing life into a being. Clear your mind, focus, fill your body with energy, feel energized, feel balanced within your body, mind, and spirit. The energy you give the servitor is the energy you will get back. Next, give the servitor its name, its purpose, and I will find out. I will look at the calendar and see what date and what time I want to have the servitor be born, so that I can start working with it. Then I will give it its command words and its release phrase. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have good luck with this, and I hope that it helps you. Have a good evening, have a good weekend, and blessed be.